Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Brian Durkin, content strategist, experienced several industries. He's focusing on email marketing, branded content, SEO-driven web copy, a few other tricks I know he does really well. Didn't want to list them all out for us. He's a great resource to talk to if you want to talk about tools, you want to talk about creative ways to solve problems. We often just jam about like what tool we're using, what are you doing these days. And then aside from his full-time day job, he runs the Full Belly Laughs podcast. It's great. It's been going on, what, 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years now. So he runs it. It's a fun listen, and I think he's going to be talking a little bit more in detail, so I'm not going to spoil it all.
Okay.
We can give you some space to talk about it. But yeah, let's give Brian a warm welcome.
Thank you everyone for coming out. Some interesting technical stuff. Alright, I'm gonna open with one of these. There's a father that is watching his son play his last at-bat at like a Little League game, and his son has wanted to get a hit all year, hasn't gotten a hit, right? And his last at-bat, he's at bat for a while. He gets like 3 foul balls, but he eventually strikes out. And on the car ride home, the father's like, son, I'm sorry that you didn't get a hit this season. And very confused, the son's like, what are you talking about, Dad? I hit the ball 3 times. All right. Yeah, so basically, I think the attitude of that little kid is really important when it comes to content creation, especially when you're going to scale up. It's not about cracking it out of the park every time. You know, we've all heard that 80-20 rule where, you know, most of your leads or success or volume or what have you is going to come from a very small percentage of the things that you output. So that's one thing I wanted to get out of the way of this presentation, is that I'm teaching tips and tricks on how I ramped up production in my own projects, not necessarily promising you're going to be the next greatest thing. So yeah, this is just a quick rundown of what we're going to discuss. You'll learn about me, the case study, why we should even scale content or create content to begin with, and some pitfalls that you can run into when you use these tips and tricks, and also just finding your voice and recapping it all. So, about me, as Nicole kindly said, I do a lot of things. I'm a strategist, I'm a podcast consultant, I'm a comedian, I perform stand-up and improv, I do bomb like my opening story, and in my free time I also travel the world to play trading card games and various narcissistic pictures of me. So with all of these activities, I do still dedicate about 20 to 25% of my time to sleeping, so I'm still a reasonable adult that's not like on Adderall or anything. And that's going to be key when we get into all things I was able to ramp up. So the case study is going to be the podcast, Full Belly Laughs. For anyone that's uninitiated, it's a humor website that has a weekly podcast. It's kind of like a dinner party meets a date night. So it covers food, drinking, entertaining, and board games and stuff like that. It's had moderate success in the podcast realm, considering that I am nobody. So I'm not a famous comedian. This isn't WTF or, armchair expert or anything like that. So it's done very well. Also, I'm not doing ads for like stamps.com or anything like that. So it's unlimited budgets, pretty much out of my pocket. And of course, that's limited staff. It's just me. So I do all those things plus this and all the stuff we're about to talk about. So why would we even create content? This is a quick rundown of my philosophy. There's a ton of great presentations out there on like the purpose of content. Check them out. This is not going to be that. I'm not going to try and summarize what someone's done already better. But make great content. It's not really a sales pitch. You know, you don't want to just list a bunch of facts about your product or hustle someone into like buying a particular product. David Thomas said really well in another presentation that he did. We used to help run this meetup. You know, it's not about like, hey, buy these shoes. It's more about, you know what's great? Running, right? Like, let's get together and celebrate running. So to kind of create like a through line with the scalability, I kind of see the content strategy just focusing on like what this identity is going to be, and then each piece is just going to add to that character. And scalability kind of ensures that the thing doesn't die and you don't run out of steam, because I work with a lot of people that have a lot of great ideas, but they don't realize how much work it can be, and they don't have a plan to keep it going, so then it dies. So for Full Value Labs, it does a lot of good hyperlocal content, and it has a decent size of superfans that are dedicated, like even without doing really any paid promotions. People know that the show comes out on its own. So the content that's already putting out is resonating. We just decided, royal we, to kind of double down on that. So the idea was to have daily content, multiple mediums, active social channels, and also make the content a lot more searchable. Sorry, I'm moving in multiple places here. So here's my 4 main points on how to scale up your content creation. Don't worry, the slides will be available. I'll also revise this list as the presentation goes on. So, but essentially, these are my 4-step process. I thought back the same ideas, cascade them into multiple mediums, proliferate through social channels, entwine into manifold workflow, and I guess the secret 5th one is create a PowerPoint slide used with Source. So, all right, so buying back the same ideas, what I mean by this is, one thing that I've seen people fail, or at least I've failed in my own experience, is kind of running out of steam on like what to talk about. So before I even let the printing presses run on like releasing a blog or anything, just figure out what my content calendar is going to be, and I base that content calendar off some kind of like renewable well that makes sense for the brand. So that's why I say something cyclical. So for Full Value Labs, people are familiar. There's like these national food holidays that are every day apparently. There's a great website that like lists all of them called Foodimentary. Today is National Pancake Day, so I guess have pancakes after the meetup. I don't know. But there's a lot that you can say about these national holidays. They're a good writing prompt. But there's pretty much just this site like listing what they are and like some facts, and there's not really anyone commenting them, especially in the humor space. So that's why I thought it'd be a good idea for Full Value Labs to kind of leverage this existing calendar as writing prompts for everything that would be kind of created on the site. It's also familiar, so when possible, it's good to like hook into some kind of cultural reference or something that's like not too foreign. Everyone knows what pancakes is, or everyone knows what national holiday is. It's kind of self-explanatory, but you don't want to have to educate someone on the thing that you're trying to attract them to begin with. And it's important to have a point of view. Like this site just lists facts about these holidays. Regurgitating that would be lame, uninspired, and possibly be ripping off this site, but it's perfectly fine for me to link to this and then put a comedic spin on it and create other pieces of content. So cascading into multiple mediums. So once you have your content calendar and you're like, all right, well, today is National Pancakes Day, that's your writing prompt for pretty much any type of medium of content that you want to create. So just pull a screenshot of the new website that's being created for Full Value Labs. It's still in development, but for example, January 1st is National Bloody Mary Day. So I don't know if you guys celebrated that, but it was. And so there's a lot of angles that we can take. You can have a blog post that pokes fun at the cocktail or celebrates it. We can have an infographic that points out like silly facts related to the drink. We have a video that like follows somebody that's like in the pursuit of a Bloody Mary, right? The key, though, is the through line is the holiday, but they're not all just regurgitating literally the same copy or message. And the reason for that is if someone listens to the podcast or reads the blog post, I don't want the video to be like utterly redundant and just be me like reading the blog post, right? So just increases time on page and gives your consumers of this content more reason to check out more stuff and other opportunities to share. So proliferate through social media channels. So once you have all the types of content that you know you're going to create and you have your calendar, now it's time to promote that. Since football life's on a budget and everyone always touts the importance of social media, I feel like social media is a no-brainer. And the way that I do this is I have tabs and tabs and sheets of Google Sheets, and it's a great way to keep everything organized and reference the same copy over and over again. So, for example, I'll have a tab that's like just call to actions for the podcast. And I'll be like, listen now, check it, am I okay to listen, hear what we say, and have that, and then just reference that over and over again when combining all these cells into like one tweet. It's a great way to kind of leverage the same copy over and over again and keep things hyper organized. And then I put Meet Edgar up here because they're my favorite social media tool to use. The best part about them compared to like a Buffer or a Hootsuite is when they send a social post out for you, it doesn't just expire and leave the platform. You actually upload things in categories and it recycles them over and over again. So the way that I use this is, this Google Sheet here is my Throwback Thursday tweets, right? That we'll just have one for every episode of the podcast, and there's like 160 episodes right now. So once I have that CSV put together, I can upload that to MeetEdgar, make it a category for Throwback Thursday, be like, I want MeetEdgar to tweet one of these out at 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. every Thursday, and I'll just do that forever. I'll never have to add to that unless I want to add the new episodes that came out. So it's a great way to kind of scale up and not have someone have to constantly upload new stuff to like Hootsuite. Alright, and in trying to imagine workflow, the Google Sheets is a big part of that. Essentially, you want to avoid all manual steps in your process as much as possible. So reuse, reuse, reuse. And the biggest lesson I've learned in all of my content creation over the years is there's probably, and after that, as lame as that phrase is, constantly I've been amazed with what tools are already out there. There's some startup or some software company that has created some niche thing that'll really help you. If it doesn't exist yet, you can probably hack together a solution. So for example, there was another social media management tool called Social Pilot, and they were pretty much Hootsuite but cheaper, so that's why I used them. But one thing that they didn't realize that they did was they let you export the tweets or Facebook posts that you've done in the past. So when you pulled down that CSV of things you've already sent, they gave you their Amazon server link to any images that you uploaded to your posts. So if I knew I was going to reuse the same image over and over again, but a different copy, I now got the link to where it was on their server, and didn't have to keep attaching it manually every time. I can just add that as a column in the CSV. So you get paid out for using tools as they're not intended, so save a lot of time. But these are some of my favorites, and I'll have references for them at the end of the deck. Biteable really helps me create videos really fast. Canva for infographics. Craft CMS is my preferred content management system, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And Sonics is great for anyone that's considering doing a podcast. They're a transcription service, so they have not only really good accuracy and real reasonable rates, but they actually give you a player that goes on your website that drops in the whole transcription as HTML. So it's basically like getting a free 10,000 word blog post for any of my podcasts. So when I have a podcast that's like Oreos versus Chips Ahoy, it now looks like it's the authority on the debate between those cookies. So it's been really successful for that. So to kind of just take a quick recap of what the plan was, leveraging all those tools and organizing them and taking that 4-step process. Once the new site launches, there'll be daily content, including 5 new podcasts besides the weekly one, daily videos, daily infographics, daily blog posts, and at least a post on 5 different platforms about all those things, and all those tools and hosting, what have you, only costs like $300 a month. So that's awesome for me since this company's a party of one. So some pitfalls that you can fall into. Take my case study with a grain of salt. Like $300 sounds great, but I don't charge my own company for my own time. So if you're trying to adopt this for your own organization, yeah, these tools are going to be great to leverage, but you need a freelancer to do it. You have to bake that cost into it. And if you're just a bigger company, like some of the places I've been at before, there's just going to be more review cycles, so it's going to be a little bit tougher to maybe pass some of this stuff through, especially some of the automation, but that's really depends on where you're at. And the other piece of advice is I was or currently am on a WordPress site, and there's a lot of challenges with that platform sometimes. So you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to a CMS. So Wix and Squarespace and even WordPress are great if you're like, I hate development, I don't want to touch it. You're just going to have some trade-offs when it comes to how optimized your site is for ranking on the web. Part of the reason I moved to Craft was I got a lot more control on structuring my content so Google could see it the way that I wanted to see it. Particularly with that transcription tools that you use. Also, I have sheets and sheets of different social media posts that I'm ready to fire at any point. And it's easy to start to sound robotic. So just make sure there's a human touch to everything that you're doing, and just stay true to the voice of your brand and your company. It'll really help guide you when you're not sure. I do a lot of stuff, and I have to make sure that I just take breaks so I don't sound robotic when creating these things. And it's also just good to do a reality check. Just because you can set up one of these CSVs and tweet every 15 minutes around the clock doesn't mean you really should. So just be mindful of that, and then also just ask yourself, yeah, I could create all these things in all these different mediums. It doesn't even make sense for my audience. I guess I didn't really talk about that up front, but I did some research on a few different platforms and a few different spaces, and just knew that something like an infographic had some potential by that, but it might not make sense for you. So the general advice is just because you can doesn't mean you should, which is kind of self-evident, but I think we're pointing out. Especially since something like this can happen to you. I used to tweet nonstop about the weekly podcasts and tag the guests that were in it. And one guest didn't really like that. So if you're going to reuse your content, which I'm a huge fan of, I think Meet Egger did some research where it was 97% of your followers won't even see any one individual post that you make on a platform, just because there's so much stuff in their feed at all times. But if you tag people, they will see it. So that's kind of just one main thing I wanted to highlight. One of the keys to creating content is you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to be robotic. It's important to find your voice and tone and develop that. You could do all the tactics I started at the top, but the video is going to turn out wildly different than how the blog post is going to feel unless you have strong governance around why we create things the way that we create them. With Full Body Labs, I have the advantage and I'm a one-man army, so it's I have a lot of that in my head. Don't need to be explicit about doing the documentation, but the bigger the team gets, or if I were to start outsourcing all this work, like I really need to be crystal clear about what those things are. So that's like one big piece of advice that I would give if you're going to start launching into this stuff. And this is the best way I feel like you can sum it up. You know, if content is king, like context is queen. You pretty much have to ask yourself, why are we doing this? Does it make sense to do it this way? Are we doing it the right way for the people that we really want to reach? I feel like Seth Godin says it in a really elegant way that I try to think about all the time is, whenever you're going to make something, you know, who's it for, what's it for? That's really what slides kind of all about. Yeah, I got that just for you. So yeah, one thing, basically be yourself. You know, like you could use all these tactics to scale up really fast and really quickly and just be like putting out a bunch of stuff all the time. But the goal isn't to just be friends with everyone. Because there's, you know, people out there you probably don't want to be friends with. So, you know, you're looking for your tribe members, whatever your brand is. So just let that voice and tone be your guiding light. You know, be yourself. If anything, if you don't have that defined, and you'll attract like-minded people. All right. So, just to kind of recap the methodology I was talking about earlier. You want reusable ideas, you know, like as I said, that well you can always go back to. You don't want to build a content calendar that's like, oh, for the next 3 months, these are the topics we're going to talk about. Ideally, you want to create something that's very cyclical and kind of deep, and it works even if it's not going to be something daily. You know, like if you're someone that wants to comment on movies, you know, there's 24 categories for the Oscars and like 27 for the Golden Globes. So you have just like one specialty award that's like 52 different awards. Now you have a writing prompt for a weekly column, right? So there's a bunch of ways to like mix and match and like pull things together. So the best advice I can give you for the reusable ideas is just to think about what that magic number is. You know, if you want something once a month, what's your 12 things you're always going to do for each month? 52 or what have you. And then just make sure whatever topics that you pick at least have enough depth where you can spin out different types of pieces if you want. So that way you're just not being overly redundant, and it all kind of cascades from there. You know, like if your video is going to be different enough from your blog post, well now that just gave you at least 2 social posts, one talking about each one because they're different enough. But at least will give you some consistency on those platforms because you're talking about things that are either related or similar topic, or at least fit your brand. And then, yeah, the more manual work you have to do, trying to like find things in a shared drive or having things in random places are going to cripple your automation and your scalability. So similar to kind of getting that content calendar up to snuff from the beginning, same thing with organizing where all your stuff's going to be, how things are going to reference each other, who's responsible for what. Laying all that groundwork out in the beginning will save a ton of headaches later. And to that point, you know, if you're not a team of one, and even if you are, it's really important to just have some kind of governance on your voice and tone and how you say something and why you say something the way that you do. It's just going to make it a lot easier to scale production even from starting this as your team grows. And also, a little bonus tip that I didn't really like include in this presentation, but your documentation about your brand guidelines you can always spin into content on your website or just available online. You can kind of think about like a robust about the company page as almost a way to like sneak these rules in there. And this is something that I kind of live by a lot with all my activities, but you know, if you're a scrappy like solo entrepreneur like myself, you know, you kind of have to say no to some happy hours, and so you have to kind of dig in and do the work. But a lot of these tips and tricks are going to make it look like you're a real like robust company, and work hard to even ramp up further and be stronger and more agile. but it's not necessarily like a cakewalk or easy or like, oh, I just put in an hour and now I have like all this cool stuff. So it's it's just some real work. And, my Saturdays are spent doing in the afternoon, a lot of work on this kind of stuff, not crushing whatever the Netflix show is. So just some advice to be realistic on what it takes. All right. Room gifts work with this crowd. Okay, so like I kind of teased at the beginning, let's say you do all this stuff and you're like, I didn't go viral, it didn't succeed the way I wanted it to succeed, like what the heck happens, Brian, you failed me, you're the worst, yada yada yada. So, like I said, there's not going to be, I can't tell you what that piece of content needs to be in order for you to like knock it out of the park and get a grand slam. The key to kind of scaling up content, and the reason that you want to, is it just gives you more at-bats on getting those hits. For example, I have a lot of data now with the podcast that I've been doing it for over 3 years and have 160 episodes, but I only did like 1 episode a week, where if I was a 2 episode a week show, I would have like the same amount of data in like half the time, right? So I would have been able to make improvements in the show in a quicker time. So another thing that you can consider if you're worried about a business case for scaling up content at an organization is, I don't know if I actually said it right on this slide, but this is all one big test, right? As I mentioned with like the baseball analogy or like the 80-20 rule, like a lot of these pieces are not going to be gangbusters, but that's okay. You're crossing things off the list. It's very much like a game of Clue. Like you're not just going to guess who killed the guy that dies in that game. I don't remember his name, but he's just always dead. So, but yeah, I mean, every time that you make a guess or you make something, you're learning about the audience that you want to attract, or learning about the people that maybe you don't want to attract. But it is important to understand, even outside of just being like this is going to be a test campaign or a test initiative to Scalable as content, is just understanding how you want to measure success. It's really important. It's a bunch of people could, for example, Full Laughs, part of its mantra is to not have ads on the podcast, and to ultimately create enough super fans where donations make it self-sufficient. So, all of these content pieces are great and awesome, but if I'm not seeing like the growth in donations that I want, then there's something missing with like converting that person. So maybe I'm just attracting people that are casual fans, but it's not really like hooking them to be part of the family. So just think about with your campaign, which engagement points are really going to tell the story that you're hoping. All right, so to kind of wrap up everything we talked about, and all the ingredients to the solid content calendar, to kind of go back to the voice and tone thing, and I touched on it just a little bit, but just knowing who you're going after, knowing your target audience is really, really key. And those personas, it's an exercise I even did for Full Laughs. And if you're, I don't know exactly what everyone's working on in the audience, but if you're someone that's in a position like me where Full Laughs is like, has me performing and has me as kind of like someone that people listen to, literally, because it's a podcast, I have 2 types of listeners. I have people that listen to the show because they just enjoy the content. I have people that listen because like someday they might want to start their own podcast, or they might want to get into comedy. So there's always going to be there's always going to be more than one person that could be interested in your stuff, and to cater to each of those, I do things different on the site. And yeah, that'll inform your brand guidelines that typically you're trying to attract, and the right way to speak to them and attract them will help inform who you are and how to do things. And as I said, rotation of deep topics, guidelines on topic variations, so that kind of just pulls together the 2 things that we were talking about, where why would I create this, and if we are going to create it, how do we create it, and just keeping the organization as intuitive as possible. One thing that I've learned from all organizations I've been at is you can have all the documentation in the world, but like, you know, there's a reason people sell textbooks and like buy Harry Potter, right? So like, make things as easy as possible and hopefully as clean to understand versus reading some like Word document on a shared drive to figure out where some other file is. Nobody's gonna do that. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to organize everything. And just you know, just a little bit, end with some inspirational thoughts here. You know, I know I've worked with a lot of people, especially like other comedians that are apprehensive to just try, but you know, you're usually going to strike out, but you can't hit a home run from sitting on the bench. So there's a particular baseball player that I think illustrates this the best. For anyone who doesn't know, this is Reggie Jackson. He has more strikeouts than anyone in the major league ever, by a lot. But he's also a 14-time All-Star, 2-time World Series MVP, and in the Hall of Fame. So none of those things would happen if you just got discouraged by striking out. So it may seem like a mammoth project to scale up content or to just even start creating content for the first time, but don't go out there and like take swings. It's just never going to happen. So I hope that all of these tips and tricks kind of encouraged you or at least gave you some guiding light. And yeah, get out there and create some awesome stuff. Thank you.